So, looking back at the last chapter on our knowledge of general principles, and ahead to the next chapter, chapter 8, a priori, how a priori knowledge is possible. Let's think about a question about general principles. Do general principles exist? No, they don't, according to Russell. They don't exist. But that doesn't mean that they're not real, and it doesn't mean that when we become aware of them, when we think about them, that we're not thinking about part of reality. He'll make a distinction in a later chapter about things that exist and things that subsist. Things that exist as opposed to things that have being, and we'll, I don't know how helpful that actually is, but we'll get to that. Well, what if general principles don't exist? Then okay, what does exist? We think about the subject really with which Russell started this book, which is sense experience and our direct acquaintance with the sense data that provide the content of our sensations. What is the real significance of sense data? I would say that the major significance of sense data for Russell is that sense data give us information about existing things that exist. We presume. We can never be sure, but we guess that they do. That is, that the colors, the sounds, the feels, the tastes, all of the sense data that I find in my experience are indications for me that of the properties of existing things. And what are existing things? Existing things are the physical objects that we normally assume populate nature, populate the physical universe. So existence is something that belongs to particular things in the world for Russell. And if we read chapter 6 again, general principles, he says, there is another point of great importance in which the empiricists were in the right as against the rationalists. Nothing can be known to exist except by the help of experience. And I think that we can read sense experience there. But if we say that anything in the world exists, it's because we can relate it to a sense experience or set of sense experiences that we have had, and there's no way to know whether anything does exist except through sense experience. So that's kind of important in the sense that remember that everything that we know through our sense experience is doubtful. I think that we've established that. So my knowledge as to the existence of any particular object, let's say, okay, this cell phone I say exists. Why? Because I've had certain sense experiences. That's because I've become acquainted with certain sense data. And those sense data I can be sure of, insofar as they are sense data. That is, insofar as they are merely a part of my experience. On the basis of those various sense data, the visual, tactile, audio sense data, I make a logical inference that there is a thing in the world called a cell phone, and that it is real, and that it exists, and that it is the cause of my various sense data. But I think on his very strong claim that on the basis of how he's proceeded here, that I can never be absolutely sure that that thing in the world either exists or is anything like the sense data that I'm experiencing. That is, if the sense data somehow give me a knowledge of its true properties. The thing in itself is, I think, unknowable. But we rely entirely on the sense data to make claims about the thing in itself, the physical object. But we can never be sure that the thing exists, or how it exists, or what its true properties are, if it has any. But nevertheless, it's through experience that we become aware of existence. And when Russell, from now on, uses the term existence, he's really using it with reference to particular things in the world. And I think that we can think of those things as physical things, physical objects, because for something to exist, it has to be in space and time. That is, for something to exist, it has to be at a particular place, in a particular moment. It has to exist in successive moments in either the same place or different places. But the important thing is that it is at a particular time, at a particular place. And that goes for all particulars, all particular things in the world. That is not true of what he will call things that have being, and really, we've already been introduced to those things. They are principles, concepts. He will talk about, of course, universals, which are real for Russell, real aspects of reality, but they don't exist in the sense that they are not at a particular place at a particular time. If concepts are real, and if they have being, that is, if they have independent being of some sort, and they don't rely completely on our minds for their being, and they aren't in a particular place, they aren't in space and time, the way that they have their being is different from the way that existing things have their being. It's very important, really, for Russell that this be so. And he takes some pains to point out in this chapter, again looking back on chapter 6, about general principles. When he mentions the self-evident principles of logic, the law of identity, law of contradiction, law of excluded middle, he says there's many more. He very explicitly says that calling them laws of thought is somewhat misleading. He says the name laws of thought is also misleading. For what is important is not the fact that we think in accordance with these laws, but the fact that things behave in accordance with them. In other words, the fact that when we think in accordance with them, we think truly. And so what's quite important for Russell's view of the reality is that things like the laws of thought and supposedly self-evident fundamental principles of logic are not simply aspects of us. They're not subjective. They're objective. That is, they are real, and their reality does not depend upon us in any way. That is, that it's not just a case that we think in accordance with the laws of logic, as if they were merely a psychological principle about how we happen to think and make sense of things. But he continues the fact that things behave in accordance with them. That is, that for Russell, the laws of logic are not merely the laws of thought, they are the laws of reality. For instance, the law of contradiction, nothing can both be and not be, is not a reflection of our inability as thinkers of a certain type to think that something both is and not is at the same time. Rather, it's a law that nothing in the universe can, in itself, both be and not be at the same time. So this distinction between things that exist, which are in space and time, and other parts of reality, which can, strictly speaking, not be said to exist, but also be real, is really the fundamental thing that we're getting at now, and the thing that Russell is most interested in. And we'll move on now to his chapter on the a priori, which is really separating himself, he thinks at least, from Kant.